Ladies and gentlemen, this is TVP World. I'm your host Benjamin Lee, and welcome aboard the Eastern Express. Washington says it's fighting drug traffickers. Caracas says it's preparing for war. And somewhere between those two stories stands Nicolás Maduro, Venezuela's strongman, survivor, and self-proclaimed socialist, once again staring down the barrel of US pressure. It may be happening again. Only this time, his old friend in Moscow may not be able to save him. On this episode, we are looking at Russia's foreign policy on Central and South America. We're talking Venezuela, but also Cuba and Nicaragua. So, without further ado, let's take a look at our latest report to find out more.
The situation around Venezuela is starting to heat up as the Venezuelan government is accusing the United States of preparing an invasion. Caracas has deployed its military and is looking to its allies for support. One such ally, perhaps the closest despite the distance separating them, is Russia. The alliance between the two countries goes back several decades, all the way back to the Cold War. While it hasn't been incredibly relevant these past few years, both Moscow and Caracas maintained close relations.
Russia and Venezuela are working together to seek a new world order based on the rule of law, the inadmissibility of using neo-colonial approaches.
The Venezuelan president seems to be hoping for strong support from his distant ally, but Moscow's options are limited. The war in Ukraine has exacted a heavy toll on Russia's capability to project power beyond its own borders, as proven by its inability to act in the face of Azerbaijan's conquest of Nagorno-Karabakh in 2023. Moscow doesn't seem inclined to just stand idly by, however, as reports show that a Russian military aircraft has landed in Venezuela. The plane in question is often used by the Russians to supply various arms and equipment, so while the Russian army will probably not put boots on the ground, it may be looking to support the Venezuelan government through different means.
And now, let's zone in on the East planning portion of our show. Russia is looking to revive some of its alliances to rebuild its Cold War-era strategy against the United States. Moscow have been busy reinstalling pacts and defense cooperation treaties with countries like Cuba and Nicaragua.
The Russian parliament has ratified a new military cooperation agreement with Cuba. It is widely seen as a gesture meant to harken back to the Soviet Union's sphere of influence and restore Russian presence beyond the country's immediate theater of operations. The agreement is not regarded as one which will lead to an actual deployment of troops. Observers point out that this agreement is very much a symbolic return to Soviet-era policy, of which Cuba was a crucial part. After all, the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962 was perhaps the most poignant aspect of this policy. Yet Cuba is not the only nation in the region with which Moscow is seeking to boost ties, be it for show or for concrete military action. Russia has also signed a defense cooperation agreement with another ally, Nicaragua. While this still is mostly focused on very sweeping statements about support and security, it is yet another move that the Russians have made in the Latin and South American regions in recent months, just as the United States has become more active in the same area.
And now, let's take a look at the issue in greater detail. Back in 2019, Trump challenged Maduro, who survived. And who stood by him through it all? Vladimir Putin. Russia flew in military advisors, blocked UN resolutions, and poured billions into Venezuela's oil industry, all to prove that Moscow could defend its allies and challenge Washington in America's own backyard. But that was then. Today, Russia is a very different power. Bloodied, sanctioned, and stuck in a war of attrition in Ukraine. So when Maduro reportedly sent a letter begging Putin to restore Venezuela's aging Sukhoi fighter jets and bolster its air defenses, that was a plea for relevance and perhaps for rescue. Moscow did respond, at least symbolically. A Russian Il-76 transport plane landed in Caracas in late October, following a suspiciously roundabout route. Analysts speculate that it may have carried Pantsir S-1 air defense systems. The Kremlin, for its part, has kept quiet, which in diplomatic terms usually means yes, but don't make us admit it. Still, no one expects Russian troops to show up on Venezuelan soils this time, and analysts agree Russia will not go to war for Venezuela. Putin's priority is the survival of his own regime, not Maduro's. And yet, Russia's fingerprints are still there in a form of a newly ratified strategic partnership agreement, hurried through in the Duma in record time. It's a vague document, full of talks about mutual security and defense cooperation. But it signals one thing clearly: Moscow wants to remind the world that it still has friends outside of Eurasia. But what exactly can Russia do? Well, not much beyond words. The days of Soviet-style projection into the Western Hemisphere are long gone. Even in 2019, Moscow's aid to Maduro was more about optics than outcomes. Then again, some analysts suggest that Putin might secretly welcome an American operation against Maduro. Not because he wants to lose a client, but because it would feed a narrative he loves, that it's the West, not Russia, that behaves like an empire. But make no mistake, for Moscow, the stakes are high. Venezuela has been one of the last reliable bridgeheads of Russian influence in Latin America, alongside Cuba and Nicaragua. It's also home to vast oil reserves, the largest in the world, where Russian firms like Rosneft have invested heavily. Losing that foothold would be a strategic and economic blow. If this really is 2019 all over again, the cast may be the same, but the balance of power has changed. The United States is emboldened, Russia is diminished, and Venezuela stands caught between them, led by a man who's run out of miracles and allies alike. In 2019, Moscow saved Maduro. In 2025, it might just send thoughts and prayers. And now, here to shed more light on the issue is Joanna Gosłowska-Bolik, Assistant Professor of Political Science from University of Warsaw. Hello and welcome to Eastern Express.
Hello, it's my pleasure to be with you.
So, we've been focusing a lot on Russia's foreign policy, especially on the European as well as the Asian front. But something that often gets overlooked is their involvement and their footprint in Central and South America. What can you tell us about that?
So Russia's influence in Latin America is a long-standing, multi-phased strategy involving economic cooperation, political alliances, military cooperation, and also information warfare. All of this mostly aimed at counteracting US dominance in the region. And also Moscow focuses especially on three countries that serve as the key alliances for Russia. This is Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Cuba. These are countries with authoritarian regimes that keep all these kind of ties, strong ties with Moscow for their strategic reasons.
And now we're seeing Venezuela being in the crosshairs of the U.S. administration once again. And of course, in the past, they've been looking towards Russia as someone that can bail them out. But with Russia being distracted in Ukraine with their own war of attrition and all the spiting sanctions, their economic issues, they don't seem to be quite as capable to come to their aid. How do you think the dynamic is going to change going forward?
So Moscow's moves towards closer relations with Latin America, and especially with countries like Venezuela, started almost from the beginning of Putin's presidency. And close cooperation with Venezuela has been of special importance for Russia for many reasons, for geopolitical reasons, for their economic reasons. It is investment in energy sector and other sectors in Venezuela, and also for political reasons, especially with this political term of Hugo Chavez, who was a very close ally to Moscow. The ties began to become closer. And Moscow also became a key ally in military cooperation, just especially in the years of economic boom in Venezuela, which was in the first decade of this century. So before Hugo Chavez passed and Nicolás Maduro started his first term. All these ties are important now, but now we can add something more. So the US military military build-up in the Caribbean region is something that serves as an additional factor here. So Moscow is trying to strengthen this relationship just to counteract the U.S. dominance in the region and just to show their engagement with these countries that used to serve as the close allies for Moscow.
Right, so it does seem like Moscow actually have more and more incentive to help out these Latin American countries with as they're butting heads with the U.S. administration. But do you think that they do have the capacity to contribute for anything substantial, given that they already have their hands tied in their own war?
So this is an important question now that everybody is asking. Of course, we cannot assess in detail this military engagement of Russia in the region, and especially in Venezuela. Russia was asked by Nicolás Maduro, the president of Venezuela, for help for delivering their arms to Venezuela and to serve as technical assistance in this situation. And we have the evidence of some transport aircraft that moved between Moscow, through other countries, especially in Africa, to Venezuela. So some kind of probably military transport and also technical support has been sent to this country. But I do not believe that Russia is going to engage more in Venezuela. This is because of two reasons. One reason is that they don't have really long-standing engagement, in this sense that they are not very familiar with this kind of country. So we can observe more presence in Cuba, not that of Venezuela, where we can observe more Cuban and even Chinese influence. The other reason for this is that Russia probably is more interested in keeping out of this difficult case, I mean the US and Venezuela conflict, because they would really appreciate if something happened between these countries, because it could mean that they can use their strategy towards the countries that are close to Russia, just to assure their zone of influence here in Europe and Asia instead of Latin America. And it could be more important at the moment for Russia.
All right. Can you explain to us the last bit a little bit? Because we're also hearing some analysts are saying that perhaps it is somewhat preferable for Moscow to some degree that the Trump administration are butting heads with Latin America, seeing that it also gives them a convenient rhetoric to paint America as a more kind of imperialistic part of this equation. Do you think that's kind of a valid point to take?
Well, to some point, yes. Of course, there are many reasons to stay in Venezuela, and one of the reasons is economic engagement or investment engagement, or the huge Venezuelan resources that are, of course, attractive asset for everybody and for Russia as well. And as we can go a bit back to this case, the initiator and main executor of this kind of Putin's policy towards Venezuela is Igor Sechin, whose roots are Russia's special service, and who is a linguist fluent in Portuguese and Spanish. And Sechin is one of Putin's closest associates, and he has a special interest in Venezuela for geopolitical and economic reasons, and because of the state oil company Rosneft, where he is a key figure. Now, so this company Rosneft is very much engaged in Venezuela because of the largest oil reserves in the world that are discovered and confirmed in Venezuela. So for Russia, this is, of course, a very important and maybe key asset to be present and not to give up this place too easily.
Right. And looking at Ukraine's foreign policy, we've recently seen that they've also cut ties with Nicaragua, and seeing that, again, these South America, Middle America, Latin America countries are quite pro-Russian in their stance. But are we seeing a very clear divide now when it comes to this conflict in Ukraine and where these Latin American countries lie when it comes to allegiances?
So this is the other case, very important, Latin America, that we should keep our eyes on, because Nicaragua with its very authoritarian regime, has become intelligence and propaganda hub for Russia, and it stays with this role for Latin America. And for instance, in a multinational forests like the UN, for instance, where some decisions, for instance, sanctions against Russia are taken, Nicaragua also serves as the Russian tube, just to counterplay the policy executed by the European Union and the US, of course.
Right. Thank you so much for your input and insight. Really appreciate it. And thanks for being with us on Eastern Express.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
And now we're moving on to the Eastern News Flash, a series of all the other stories from the East that you don't want to miss. The use of AI-powered drones in demining operations in Ukraine has led to a massive surge in success rate. The technology has increased the productivity of demining efforts by 800%.
Demining operations are some of the most difficult ones that Ukrainian services and volunteers are currently faced with. The process is not only very meticulous and therefore slow, but also very costly both in terms of money and manpower. Each breakthrough in demining technology not only speeds up the process, but also saves lives. A new 18-month field study in Ukraine shows that the use of AI-analyzed drone imagery has led to far shorter timelines of operation, in addition to cuts in costs of up to 50%. Mine contamination is a serious problem in Ukraine, as the invading Russian forces have mined roughly 30% of Ukraine's territory. The situation is particularly dangerous in liberated areas, as ordinary civilians can stumble upon undiscovered and unexploded mines.
South Korea says that Pyongyang has sent 5,000 construction troops to Russia. The purpose of these soldiers is reportedly to help repair military infrastructure.
North Korean military aid continues to play a very important role in Russia's war efforts. Pyongyang seems emboldened by its involvement in the war in Ukraine after it had sent some 10,000 North Korean troops to the Kursk region to push back the Ukrainian incursion in the area. This latest set of soldiers is meant to not only repair infrastructure in Russia, but also help construct new sites which will most likely be used to further the invasion. South Korean lawmakers also warn that there have been signs of further military training in preparation for new troop deployments. In return for sending these troops, North Korea reportedly receives financial aid, military technology, and food and energy supplies from Russia.
Turkmenistan is seeking to join the rest of its region when it comes to green energy ventures. The country has announced the construction of a new energy-efficient power plant on the Caspian shore.
Turkmenistan is looking for ways to solve its ongoing energy crisis and fulfill its long-standing ambition of becoming one of its region's key energy exporters. One proposed solution is a combined cycle power plant of a plant capacity of 1.6 gigawatts per year. While it will involve several foreign companies, these have not been named as of yet. This new project, announced by the country's energy minister, is designed to meet domestic demand and enable power exports to a new range of partners in the Caucasus and even to Turkey. As for its aspirations to export energy to Turkey in particular, Turkmenistan may be required to join the Trans-Caspian Power Line, a regional power grid initiative between Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan.
And that's all for this episode of Eastern Express. Before more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.